Hey guys, Lexi here, sitting out here on a beautiful September morning, enjoying the park. It's finally cooled down in the desert a little bit, kind of a little cool breeze coming through here, which means it's only like 85. That's pretty cool, as opposed to our hundreds degrees in the summer. So today I saw somebody in another Facebook group post a quote from another spiritual teacher, or I don't know if it was really a quote, but she was paraphrasing something she read in the book. And I wanted to talk about this because it goes right along the lines of what I always say about you have to be willing to change your story if you want to see your reality change. And I think to summarize it, the person said something like, the quote was something like, you can pray to have your prayers answered, but they won't really be answered until you get up and decide to go live your life as if they've already been answered. And how important it is to keep your state of being independent from your outside circumstances or your environment or whatever else is going on that you perceive in your reality. And this is exactly what I teach in different words about changing your story, and how sometimes our lives can change dramatically, and our bodies, especially for those of us that have disease, that's a huge one, right? So our bodies can actually heal sometimes just by changing our story. So I want to talk about how changing the story is so important, has been so important in my life for my healing from irritable bowel disease, as well as a huge component to healing a lot of areas in your lives as well. You know, we get really into identifying with how our lives are, especially when we don't like them, because we look around and we see what's in our reality and we just assume that must be true. So, for example, I'll use health, because that's what has been the biggest teacher in my life, was health. I had ulcerative colitis, so it's an irritable bowel disease. And for the longest time, I really identified with being sick. I could see tests that said I was sick. I had symptoms that said I was sick. And so I really believed that I was not healthy and I was not well. And by believing that, and by deciding to identify with that story of I can't do this because I'm sick, you know, I can't eat that because my body's not well, you know, I can't live the life I want to have until my body heals, because I really identified with it and I really told that story over and over and over in my head. I really believe that that was true. It was, you know, it's an illusion. It's an illusion that we don't have what we want, because the truth is, all is well always. We do have what we want always, even if we don't see it in our reality yet. And anytime we tell a story that's different from how it actually is, it feels painful and it doesn't feel good. So every time, like, for example, used to tell myself that I was sick and I'm not healthy and I can't live the life that I want to have, I would get depressed and I would go down into despair, and it was painful. And it was painful because it wasn't true, but I really thought it was true. I was putting my well-being dependent on how my body was responding, you know, how my body was feeling. And we're not our bodies. We're not our bodies. We have bodies. We have wonderful bodies that serve us very well, but we're not our bodies. We're not our jobs. We're not our relationships. We're not any role that we identify with. We're pure unconditional love. Always, always. We are already healthy. We're already abundant. We already are the peace that we seek. We already are the freedom that we seek. And if you really want to see more of that in your reality, it's time to tell the story of how you are that, even if you don't believe it yet. It's okay not to believe it, because it's still true. Because anytime we close our eyes and we imagine how we want to feel, we imagine what the life looks like that we want, but most important, the feeling of it, the feeling of the freedom, the feeling of all is well, the stillness, the peace, then that becomes our truth, and then that starts to show up in our reality. But we have to be willing to live that life first. So when you're changing your story, it's really important to be willing to be wrong about everything you thought you knew about whatever the story is. So for health, I had to be willing to be wrong that I thought I wasn't healthy because my body was having certain symptoms, or because the doctors were telling me, the tests were saying, this is wrong, this is what's going on, your body's attacking itself. I had to be willing to be wrong about that, which was really scary because I could see that my intestines were bleeding. I could see, the pictures on the scans of what everything looked like. It looked like disease. It looked horrible. And I could see that. But I still decided, even seeing that didn't define what was going on, that didn't mean I was sick, and that I could close my eyes and really, feel into what I wanted to feel, the new story that I wanted to tell. I had to be willing not to tell the old story anymore. I mean, I had gotten so good when people would ask me how I was feeling to say, oh, well, today I had this going on and I had that going on and I feel awful, or I feel sick, or, whatever it is. I was so good at telling people how bad it was when they would ask me how I was doing, that I was keeping that story alive. And that's another thing. You don't want to keep the stories that don't serve you alive. And it's funny because it was excruciating for me. It was excruciating for me for a while to change my story. It felt painful to change my story because I didn't believe it, and I just felt like I was lying, and it was something that was so foreign to me to entertain the idea that I actually was healthy and I actually was well and I could actually live the life I wanted to have. But I did it. I decided not to share with friends and family anymore about how bad I was feeling. If they asked me how I was doing health-wise, I would tell them every day, I'm feeling better and better, because that was true. That felt better than saying, oh, today I had a bathroom accident and I was in a lot of pain and I couldn't get out of bed. That's not what I wanted to keep alive. Maybe that's what was happening, but that's not the story I wanted to tell, because I wanted to start to see evidence of how things were improving. So I would tell them every day, it's getting better and better. Every day it's getting better and better. And I would just start with small like that. I couldn't go straight to the story of, oh, I'm wonderful and life is great and I feel fabulous when I'm, sitting on the floor crumpled up in so much pain. I mean, that was way too big of a leap. But just to really believe that everything is temporary and everything is always getting better and better helped me to shift into changing that story. And then, of course, when I go to the doctor, I'd have to tell them exactly what was going on, because they were helping me with my physical body. It didn't serve me in that situation to tell a story that wasn't quite evidence that I was seeing, because I needed their help with the physical a bit. But for the most part, everywhere else and anyone else that asked, I would tell them that I was doing better and better. So it's about being willing to change that story, even if you feel like you're lying, even if you don't believe it yet. Because really, when evidence shows up in our reality, it's because we've had a thought or belief for so long that we start to identify it. We believe it's true, and then we see the evidence for it. So to be sick or to have a disease like I had, for a long time, I told the story of how things in my life were not well. I told the story for a long time how I hated my life, how I didn't like my body. Since I was a kid, I was teased and bullied for the way I looked and the way I behaved and, all sorts of things. And so I started to identify with that, and I started to hate my body, and I started to hate who I was. And so, it makes a lot of sense that eventually evidence would show up that my body was attacking itself with autoimmune disease. Of course it was going to. What else could it do when I was putting anything but love into my body and entertaining any thoughts that, weren't my truth? I mean, your body can't live without, or can't thrive without the unconditional love. It can't thrive if you're not willing to live your truth and really willing to, embody who you want to be and really state that who you are and what you want, in fact, is true. And in fact, you do have it, even if you don't see it yet. And everything's temporary. Everything's temporary. Even if your life and situations aren't going the way you want, even when you don't see the evidence yet of how everything's working out, always remember that everything's temporary and everything's shifting and everything's changing. Just allow it to be as it is. You know, I got to the point where I just allowed the disease to be there, and I decided it was okay. I was done resisting. I was done trying to heal, actually. I got to the point where I was done trying to heal, and I decided, you know what? I am healed, and I'm just going to allow it to show up, because it feels bad. It feels really bad to me to think that I'm broken or diseased or my body's attacking me for no reason. So I knew that wasn't my truth. If it felt bad, it definitely wasn't my truth. And I had to change that story and not identify with disease anymore, and decide that my body's job is not to make me happy. My body will do what it does, and it serves me well, but it's not my body's job to make me feel better. You know, it's not the doctor's job to make me feel better. It's not the test results' job to make me feel better. So instead of going down into despair every time I had a symptom, or every time something didn't work out the way I thought it was, you know, I thought I was doing this spiritual thing right. I thought I was, being positive and doing my, imaginations. But really, I was doing it to get rid of the disease. And once I allowed the disease to be there, and I just allowed everything to be okay, the pain to be okay, I allowed the idea of having my colon removed to be okay, everything shifted and eased up. You know, I really eased up on myself and eased up on my life, changed the story of how bad it was, and just watched what happened. And everything shifted, and I didn't heal right away when I did that. It took several months, but I eased up on my body, and my body healed, and my life shifted. And even before my symptoms disappeared, I decided to go live my life how I would live it had I not been sick, had I not had any disease, had I had all the confidence in the world, which I didn't, and I still don't always have all the confidence in the world, but I decided to just live my life as if I had that, because that's what I wanted. That was the new story I wanted to tell. So I went out and did it, It was as simple for me when I started as walking, up and down the street, just like 3 or 4 houses down from mine. Because before, I could not do that without bathroom accidents all the time, and the bathroom accidents would throw me into like a despair that I just couldn't live my life. And I had to decide, you know what, it doesn't matter if my body's not doing what I don't want it to do. I can still live the life I want to have. I can still go for a walk in the neighborhood and allow it to be okay that I crap my pants. It's things like that, sometimes we wait for evidence to show up of how our story's different before we go out and we live the life we want to live. And it's actually the other way around. You have to decide that you are going to live your life, and that you are going to allow yourself to have the thoughts that feel better before the reality changes, because everything in our reality is just an illusion. It's all an illusion. Our truth is health. Our truth is joy. Our truth is freedom. Our truth is love. And we make up all of these stories and reasons, and this whole world, this whole world manifests itself in a way that we're able to come back to our truth. It shows us everything that we're not. It shows us all these illusions that we identify with, so we can kind of have this idea of separation and then come back to ourselves, come back to knowing what the truth truly is. And your evidence, again, for your reality starts to show up when you decide that this is my truth. I am healthy. It's okay that the tests say I don't, or say I'm not. It's okay that my body is doing what it does. That's not me. That's not my state of being. My state of being is health. My state of being is freedom and liberation. And I decided to go for that walk. And did I crap my pants? Absolutely, I did. But I decided it didn't mean anything. And it was just a huge shift from going into despair, wanting my outside circumstances to make me feel better before I lived my life, to deciding to live my life, allow whatever happens to happen, and know that I'll be okay. I'll be okay, because I'm telling a new story now. My new story was that all is well, and it always is. All is always well, and everything is exactly right as it is happening, even if we don't like it. Have a great day, guys.